Before we dive into this beautiful story, please like the video, subscribe, share, and leave your comments below. In a desolate corner of a wind-swept village, a lone hut stood trembling under the moonlight. Inside, the air was choked with desperation. An old midwife cradled a wailing newborn, her eyes damp with equal parts sorrow and fatigue. The mother, barely more than a girl herself, lay still, her body robbed of life moments after giving birth. The midwife's heart hammered as she stared at this orphan, an unclaimed infant with no future. She could already feel the judgment of neighbors lurking beyond the thatched walls, and the rattle of the wind sounded like a death knell for this tiny being. Just as she resolved to leave the baby to fate, a tall silhouette darkened the doorway. It was Mama Kem, known for her firm stride and unyielding spirit. Her outstretched hands demanded, "Give me the child." The midwife hesitated, remembering that Mama Kem already had a daughter, Zara, the delight of her eyes and the envy of every mother in the village. The old woman murmured warnings about another mouth to feed, but Mama Kem repeated in that iron voice, "Give me the child." And so the child's fate was sealed in that single, echoing command. Little did anyone know that, from this moment on, a bitter tapestry of rivalry, secrets, and heartbreak would be woven around this baby named Amara, who would one day be both a source of greatest joy and deepest regret. Amara, wrapped in tattered cloth and cradled in unfamiliar arms, became the outsider in Mama Kem's household from her first breath. The villagers whispered that Mama Kem had taken the baby only to save face, to appear charitable, or perhaps to claim government rations that might drift into the region. Whatever the reason, Amara quickly learned her place. A second daughter in name, but never in love. Zara, the true daughter, was showered with colorful wrappers, little clay dolls, and sugary sweet pastries whenever the harvest was good. Meanwhile, Amara worked from dawn to dusk, scrubbing, fetching water, washing clothes, chores Zara would never dream of touching. Even the meager leftovers Amara ate were cold by the time she got to them, overshadowed by Zara's plates heaped with steaming yam and hearty soup. Over time, the stark inequality festered. Yet, in Amara's innocent heart, Mama Kem was still mother, the only family she knew. She did not complain because she had nowhere else to go. But each night, as she curled up on a thin mat that barely shielded her from the dusty floor, she prayed for a love that would never come. When morning came, she rose again to serve her smooth, dark skin always glistening with sweat, her heart silently crying out for acceptance. Little did she suspect that her very beauty, her gentle spirit, and the swirl of fate around her would soon twist her life into an unrecognizable shape. As Amara and Zara grew into young women, the difference in their appearances was as glaring as the midday sun. Zara was not unattractive, but next to Amara she faded like a dull shadow. Amara's eyes shone with a piercing brilliance, her hair cascaded in lustrous waves, and her skin glowed under the sun's heat as if kissed by the gods themselves. The villagers, always hungry for gossip, began whispering, "Is she truly Mama Kem's daughter? How can such a rose bloom in that household?" The more they talked, the deeper Zara's jealousy grew. She noticed how men of the village, young and old, looked at Amara with unconcealed admiration. Their idle banter turned to longing stares, and even the son of the richest trader seemed captivated by Amara's graceful movements. Zara, once the gem of her mother's eye, felt her pride crumble. Under Mama Kem's watchful scowl, Zara pretended not to care, but at night, anger simmered in her soul. She began confiding in Mama Kem, fueling her mother's suspicion and hostility. In hushed corners, they plotted ways to belittle Amara, to remind her that she was only a stray puppy they had taken in out of pity. Zara's cruel words turned sharper, Mama Kem's instructions turned harsher, and Amara, ever gentle, obeyed without argument. She had no idea that the heartbreak she felt from this neglect was only a prelude to greater agony. Because in a tight-knit community like theirs, rumors spread like wildfire, and Mama Kem was about to use those flames to shape Amara's future in the most devastating way. One evening, with the stars blinking overhead and the sound of the wind sweeping through the huts, Amara overheard the conversation that shattered her fragile sense of belonging. She was returning from washing the laundry when she caught Mama Kem and Zara whispering through the thin walls. "She's not even your real daughter," Zara hissed, frustration lacing every syllable. "You can't keep treating her like one, Mama. She's only a burden." Amara froze, her heart pounded as if trying to leap from her chest. She had suspected she was unloved, but to hear it spelled out so plainly felt like a blade ripping through her soul. Mama Kem's weary sigh followed. "Yes, she was never mine. I should have left her in that hut the night she was born. Hot tears rolled down Amara's cheeks, and for a moment she almost dropped the damp clothes she was clutching to her chest. She stood paralyzed by the doorway, fear coursing through her veins. The mother she had revered, the sister she had tried to please, both saw her as an unwanted intruder. Like a cornered animal, she stepped back into the darkness before they could discover her, her mind racing, her breath coming in ragged gasps. From that night on, Mama Kem and Zara abandoned all pretense of kindness. Amara was relegated to the role of a servant in what she had once believed was her home. She swept until her arms ached, fetched endless pails of water, and choked down scraps while Zara laughed with friends over lavish meals. Each day, Amara felt her heart grow heavier, tethered to a hopelessness she could barely escape. She had no inkling that her family's next decision would uproot her life completely and fling her into a new kind of fate she could never have imagined. The stroke of dawn found Amara bent over the cooking fire, stirring a watery porridge that Zara would later turn her nose up at. Her thoughts circled like vultures around the realization that Mama Kem and Zara despised her. The wound was still fresh, stinging her pride every time she recalled Zara's venomous words. She didn't notice when Mama Kem walked up, arms folded and face grim as a thundercloud. "You're getting married," Mama Kem announced, her tone as flat as the mortar where the cassava was pounded. Amara startled, nearly spilling the pot. She blinked in confusion, struggling to process this sudden proclamation. Married? To whom? Why? Mama Kem offered no comfort. "You will marry Kofi," she said bluntly. The name sent a chill down Amara's spine. Kofi was the local fisherman, notorious for his limp and his constant financial struggles. He lived in a ramshackle hut by the river's edge, surviving off the few fish he could catch. The village women mocked him relentlessly, and children sometimes threw stones at his crippled leg. Amara's lips parted in silent protest. When she opened her mouth to plead, Mama Kem silenced her with a glare that promised retribution. "You are nothing," Mama Kem snarled. "Be grateful he'll take you." Zara appeared in the background, a smug grin curving her lips. It was clear she derived twisted pleasure from Amara's impending misery. That very day, without ceremony, without a single blessing from the family, they bundled Amara off to Kofi's hut. A pang of despair hit her like a hammer. She felt sold, not wedded. No colorful wrappers, no lively drums, no dancing girls celebrating her union. Only the hollow footsteps of a life sentence. As the sun set, painting the sky in blood-orange hues, Amara stared at the crooked walls of Kofi's miserable shack. She wondered if her heart could break any further. It never crossed her mind that the man inside those walls held a secret more astonishing than any she could have dreamed. Walking behind Kofi to her new home felt like a funeral procession. Dust kicked up around Amara's ankles, and the weight of her fate pressed on her chest. She had no luggage, no bridal gifts, just a small cloth bundle of worn clothes. The hut was as dismal as the rumors suggested, with a leaky thatched roof and a single wooden bed that creaked when Kofi sat down. A small stool, an old fishing net, and a broken clay pot were the only other pieces of furniture. If she had thought Mama Kem's house was impoverished, this was an even starker reality. Kofi barely spoke as he showed her around. There wasn't much to show after all. When night fell, Amara's hands trembled as she lay down on a thin mat Kofi provided. She feared that he might try to exercise his husbandly rights. But to her surprise, he kept his distance. Exhaustion claimed her swiftly, but her dreams tormented her. She saw Mama Kem sneering, Zara laughing, the villagers pointing at her as though she were a sideshow spectacle. By the time she awoke, her eyes felt like they had been scrubbed with sand. Outside, the early morning dew clung to the reed walls. She rose to fetch water from the river, her first day of chores as someone's wife. She trudged through the village, head bowed, as onlookers whispered, "Poor thing. She's married to that useless fisherman." But if only they knew the undercurrents swirling beneath Kofi's quiet demeanor. Even as she lifted the heavy bucket, wincing at the pain in her arms, a small voice inside her insisted that all was not as it seemed. Perhaps it was the steady way Kofi glanced at her or how he silently helped her collect fish from the net. Something lay hidden within him, something powerful enough to alter her entire existence. Days turned into weeks, and Amara settled into the rhythms of her new life in Kofi's hut. Mornings began with hauling water, afternoons with scrubbing clothes by the river, and evenings with simple meals of roasted yams or plantains, whatever meager supplies they could afford. The hut was still cramped, the roof still leaked, and laughter was a foreign sound within those walls. Yet an unspoken understanding began to form. Kofi never berated her, never lashed out when times were tough. In fact, he often rose before dawn to fix the leaking spots on the roof or check the fishing traps, doing everything he could to lighten her load. Though he seldom spoke, each small act of kindness glimmered like a precious jewel in the dull monotony of Amara's days. One afternoon, she stumbled at the market under the weight of a basket overflowing with yams. People sneered and called her useless, but before she could wilt under their mocking eyes, a strong hand reached down to help her. It was Kofi, his eyes filled with neither pity nor scorn, just a quiet resolve. He lifted the basket as though her struggles were his own burden to carry. A lump formed in Amara's throat. No one had ever come to her aid like that. That evening, a meager supper waited at home. Amara sensed Kofi's steady gaze on her as she offered him the first scoop, but he declined with a subtle shake of the head, feigning he'd already eaten. Only later did she notice there was no second serving in the pot. He had given her all the food and chosen to go without. In that moment, her vision blurred with tears. She realized that, in Kofi's presence, she felt a warmth and acceptance she had never experienced in Mama Kem's house. Yet her heart was heavy with unanswered questions. Who was this man who showed her compassion when the entire village viewed him as a crippled, penniless fisherman? Exhausted by hunger and ceaseless chores, Amara collapsed one afternoon by the river. When she awoke, she found herself lying on Kofi's creaking wooden bed, sweat drenching her forehead. Panic seized her first. Why was she not on her mat? But then she noticed the cool cloth on her brow. At her side sat Kofi, his expression tense with concern. "You fainted," he said simply. Soft shadows played across his face, accentuating the deep lines of worry that had etched themselves into his features. Amara, groggy and embarrassed, tried to apologize for the inconvenience. Kofi merely pressed a small bowl of herbal brew to her lips, urging her to drink. The liquid was bitter, but it soothed her aching throat. That night, he tended the fire and checked on her fever without complaint. Amara felt disoriented. She'd never been cared for in such a tender, patient manner. Mama Kem would have scolded her for being weak or wasting resources. Zara would have jeered at her fragile state. But Kofi showed neither scorn nor annoyance. In her feverish haze, Amara reflected on her past. She recalled nights of quiet weeping in Mama Kem's house, the sting of hunger and the ache of loneliness. Yet here she was, lying in a rickety hut with a man considered worthless by the villagers and feeling more valued than she had ever felt before. As the fever subsided, her mind teemed with questions. If Kofi was truly as poor and crippled as everyone believed, why did he seem so quietly confident? How did he retain an unspoken authority that even mockery couldn't touch? Who was he really? By the time the fever broke, she was determined to find out, even if the truth threatened to shatter the fragile peace they'd built. Zara's unwelcome arrival on a sultry afternoon disrupted the calm. She sauntered into the tiny hut like a peacock flaunting its feathers, wearing an outfit that screamed of money and privilege. Her skin glistened with scented oils and her fingers clacked with golden rings, each more garish than the last. Amara, still recovering from her fever, sat upright on the bed, her body tensing as Zara sneered. "So this is your royal palace?" Zara spat, her gaze sweeping the dingy surroundings. She flaunted a basket overflowing with fresh vegetables, dried fish, and warm bread. Amara's stomach growled at the sight. She hadn't tasted such delicacies in ages. But Zara abruptly yanked the basket away. "Oh, I forgot," she said with a mocking laugh. "This isn't for you. Mother sent it only to show me how the other half suffers." Amara's fists clenched in silent fury, but she refused to beg. She'd already lost her dignity once she was married off like livestock. Suddenly, Kofi walked in. He took one look at Zara's smug face and the hunger etched into Amara's eyes. With a firmness that startled even Zara, he ordered, "Leave." Zara's arrogance flared. She swung around to face him. "Do you know who I am?" she demanded. "I don't take orders from a cripple." But Kofi didn't flinch. His voice held a quiet steel. "You are a woman who finds joy in another's misery," he said. "Not here." Zara hesitated, unnerved by the calm ferocity in his gaze. For a heartbeat, she seemed afraid. Then, with a final scoff, she stormed out, her expensive slippers slapping against the dusty ground. Amara remained speechless, her eyes darting between the open doorway and the place where Kofi stood. No one had ever shielded her from Zara's cruelty before. In that moment, she realized how rare and precious it was to have someone stand in her corner. A spark of trust took root in her heart, although she still wondered what kind of man, despised and ridiculed by so many, could command Zara's retreat with mere words. That evening, Kofi returned from an unexplained errand and placed a small parcel by Amara's mat. Curious, she untied the cloth to discover freshly baked bread, a piece of roasted fish, and a small flask of palm wine. Her stomach rumbled in anticipation, but shock flooded her senses. Such a meal would have cost far more than they could typically spare. "Where did you get this?" she whispered, her voice tinged with awe and suspicion. Kofi only shrugged. "You need to eat," he replied, avoiding her gaze. Amara's mind swirled with questions. She knew better than to pry further, but she couldn't shake off the suspicion that Kofi was hiding something monumental. Yet, instead of flinging accusations, she showed gratitude the only way she knew how, by inviting him to share the meal. Typically, he would claim he wasn't hungry, giving her the lion's share. This time, she gently insisted, and he hesitated only briefly before breaking bread alongside her. Silence enveloped them, but it was a comforting hush, not the icy void she had grown used to in Mama Kem's home. The sound of their quiet chewing and the crackling of the small fire formed a strange harmony, a fleeting moment of peace in a life that had been so cruel. As they finished the last morsels, a curious warmth glowed in Amara's chest. She wondered if this was what family could feel like. Yet, the more kindness Kofi displayed, the more her anxiety grew. Wealthy men from the village rarely offered her such decency. So how could a so-called crippled fisherman be so selfless? That night, sleep eluded her as she wrestled with the riddle that was Kofi. She had no clue that she was on the cusp of revelations that would forever change her life, and the entire village. Word of Kofi's uncharacteristically lavish purchase rippled through the village like a monsoon. As Amara made her way to the river, hushed whispers trailed behind her. "Have you heard?" One woman said, "Kofi bought fresh bread and fish yesterday." "With what money?" Another clucked her tongue, shaking her head. "He must have stolen it. Where else could he get that kind of coin?" Amara felt the weight of their accusations pressing down on her like a physical burden. If there was one thing she'd learned, it was that this village thrived on suspicion. Her mind drifted back to Kofi's enigmatic gazes, the subtle confidence in his movements, the measured way he spoke. Each clue chipped away at the story she'd been fed, that he was a broke, crippled outcast. Suddenly, the jeers of the villagers took on a new significance. Did their scorn mask a deeper fear of the unknown? Could it be that Kofi was more than any of them could handle? By the time Amara returned to the hut, her heart thumped louder than the gossip swirling around her. She confronted Kofi, her voice soft but resolute. "People are talking," she said. "They think you stole to buy that food." She waited, bracing herself for a dismissal or a defensive outburst. Instead, Kofi's lips curved into a faint smile. "Let them talk," he replied. Frustration and curiosity warred within her. "Who are you really?" she demanded, her voice shaking with the intensity of the question. Kofi paused, meeting her gaze with an unreadable expression. "A man who doesn't want to see his wife suffer," he answered. That response both comforted and unnerved her. It was like looking at a locked chest, certain something valuable was inside, yet unable to pry it open. And so she stood in silence, pinned between her desire for truth and the strange, budding trust she felt for the man who shielded her from a world that had done her nothing but harm. Life with Kofi began to take on a peculiar rhythm. He would vanish at odd hours, returning with small treats. A hunk of smoked fish, a soft yam, or a new pot, always downplaying how he acquired them. Amara noticed the glint of gold around his wrist one dusk, half hidden by the sleeve of his tunic. When she asked about it, he swiftly changed the subject. That night, as she lay awake on her mat, she felt the first stirrings of hope. Could it be that the universe had finally granted her a respite from pain? But hope was a dangerous thing in this village, where envy simmered and rumors could erupt like wildfire. One day, as she finished laying out their simple supper, Zara reappeared, this time with a slow, confident smile that made Amara's stomach twist with dread. Zara glow. Aided about her own blossoming life, new friends, expensive beauty products, invitations to lavish gatherings. But Amara noticed an undertone of frustration whenever Zara mentioned the disinterest of certain wealthy men who seemed too preoccupied with an unnamed woman to notice her. At first, Amara paid it no mind until Zara's gaze narrowed accusingly at her. "So," Zara hissed, "it's true, you've somehow snatched away everything that was meant for me, haven't you?" The word stung, but what stung more was the glimpse of desperation in Zara's eyes. She stormed off, leaving Amara confused and anxious. Later that evening, Kofi found Amara sitting by the river, swirling her toes in the water, tears threatening to spill. She confided in him about Zara's accusations, the torment she'd endured from Mama Kem, her constant fear that this happiness would be snatched away. Kofi's silence was comforting, but it was his gentle reassurance that stayed with her. "No one can steal what's rightfully yours, Amara. Not anymore." In the hush of twilight, she couldn't help but believe him. But deep down she also sensed that her family's bitterness was about to climax in a storm of treachery and revelations. The tension in the village reached a fever pitch when Mama Kem arrived on Kofi's doorstep, flanked by two neighbors known for their wagging tongues. She brandished a menacing glare as she demanded to see Amara. This was not a social visit. Fury twisted her features into something unrecognizable. "I warned you," she spat, "that girl is nothing but trouble." Kofi stepped in front of his wife protectively, and Mama Kem's eyes narrowed, scanning the meager hut as though it were an affront to her dignity. The two neighbors hovered behind, arms folded, eyes darting about. They had come for the spectacle, hungry for conflict. Mama Kem wasted no time in launching into a tirade about Amara's disrespect, her ungratefulness, and the shame she brought to their family. Amara's face burned as the accusations poured forth like sewage from a broken pipe. The gist was clear: she had supposedly cast a dark spell on Kofi, luring him into these mysterious acts of spending and generosity. The neighbors nodded solemnly at every outrageous claim, fueling Mama Kem's righteous fury. Just as Amara thought she could bear no more, Kofi lifted a hand. The hush that followed was deafening. His eyes held a quiet storm as he addressed Mama Kem. "Amara did not ask for your approval," he said in a low, steady tone. "You forced her to marry me. You cast her aside. And now you come here accusing her? Leave." A chill settled in the room, the kind that makes one's hair stand on end. Mama Kem's wrath flickered momentarily, replaced by a spark of fear. In that charged silence, Amara thought she saw a glimpse of recognition in Mama Kem's eyes, recognition that Kofi was not the helpless cripple the village believed him to be. Mama Kem turned on her heel and stormed out, neighbors scuttling behind her. As the dust settled, Amara braced herself. If her so-called mother had come this far, she would not rest until she dug up every buried secret and turned the entire village against them if she could. By now, the village was awash in rumors more outlandish than the next. Some claimed Kofi had made a pact with river spirits, trading his soul for untold riches. Others insisted he'd robbed a powerful chief in a distant province. Yet the truth, far stranger than any fiction, remained hidden behind Kofi's calm demeanor. Amara felt torn between gratitude for his protection and frustration at his evasiveness. It was becoming clear that his wealth wasn't a mere stroke of luck. Late one evening, unable to contain her questions any longer, she cornered him after supper. The firelight danced on his face as she pleaded, "Kofi, please, no more secrets. If you love me, tell me who you are." Her voice broke on the last word, tears threatening to spill. For a moment, he seemed guarded, torn between loyalty to his hidden life and the compassion in his eyes. Finally, he inhaled deeply. "I was born an heir to one of the richest families in the region," he confessed, each word weighted with regret. "But when I was a boy, I had a terrible accident that left me with this limp. My father cast me out, ashamed of my disability. He thought it made me unfit to inherit his empire." The campfire's glow revealed the pain etched on his face. Amara felt her breath hitch. She reached for his hand, her fingers trembling. He continued, voice trembling with bitterness. "I vowed never to rely on that name, those riches, again. I traveled, learned how to fish, how to survive on my own. But that doesn't mean the wealth disappeared. It's still mine, hidden away. I let people think I was a penniless fisherman to see who truly cared for me." His gaze fell upon her, heavy with expectation. Amara's mind spun. That her entire marriage was built upon a ruse? Anger, betrayal, and a strange sense of relief whipped through her in chaotic waves. She thought of every tear she had shed, every meal she had foregone, every lash of cruelty from Mama Kem and Zara. Now at last, the puzzle pieces were falling into place. But what did it mean for them? Amara's initial reaction was a furious mix of shock and heartbreak. She stormed out into the cool night air, tears burning her cheeks as she tried to make sense of it all. The moon cast a silver glow on the dusty path leading away from the hut, and her footsteps kicked up small clouds that shimmered in the pale light. She felt betrayed. How could Kofi watch her suffer, trapped in poverty and ridicule, when he possessed the means to free her at any moment? The revelation that her pain was partly orchestrated, even if unintentionally, stung like a fresh wound. She wandered aimlessly until she reached a familiar, dreaded place, Mama Kem's home. Knocking on the door felt like stepping into the jaws of a lion, but she had no one else to turn to. Zara answered, her expression immediately morphing into a sneer. "Back so soon? That fisherman's hut too cramped for your highness." The words died in Amara's throat. She realized, with a pang, that Zara remained oblivious to Kofi's true identity. Mama Kem soon appeared, eyeing Amara like a hawk circling its prey. "You ungrateful girl," she spat. "You want to come running back after refusing to serve us?" The barrage of insults fell on numb ears. All Amara could think was how small and cruel this place had always felt. She mustered enough courage to speak her piece. "I may have married a poor man, but I found more kindness in him than I ever did in this house." Zara's lips twisted with rage, but Mama Kem only glared, her silence cutting deeper than any insult. Amara turned and fled, heart hammering. She realized that this place had never been her refuge. And now, ironically, the one man who had shown her compassion was also the one who had deceived her. She stumbled back toward Kofi's hut, torn between fury and longing. If she stayed away, she was alone in a world that reviled her. If she returned, she'd face a man who had unwittingly orchestrated her suffering. The night offered no answers, only a chilling breeze that whispered of upheaval yet to come. When Amara finally stepped back into the hut, the dying embers of the hearth revealed Kofi hunched in quiet misery. The tension in the air crackled like distant thunder. Slowly, he rose, meeting her red-rimmed eyes with an apology etched into his features. She cut off his attempts to speak with a trembling hand. "Why?" she asked, voice raw. "Why watch me suffer? Why let everyone treat you like dirt? Why keep me in the dark?" She held her breath, almost dreading the answer. Kofi's shoulders sagged as though he bore the weight of a kingdom. "At first, I just wanted to live simply," he began, each word tinged with regret. "But then people's cruelty became a shield. If they thought I was poor, they'd leave me alone. I never meant to hurt you, Amara. I swear. I had no idea you'd be forced upon me like a transaction." Tears slipped down Amara's cheeks, but she stayed silent, letting him continue. He approached her as if nearing a frightened animal. "When you arrived, something changed," he said softly. "You reminded me what it felt like to truly connect with another human being, not marred by gold or status. By the time I realized I loved you, I was too afraid to reveal the truth." In that moment, everything about Kofi's quiet nature clicked into place. She saw a man who had been hurt, cast out by his own father, scorned by a judgmental village. A man who had become comfortable with hiding. Slowly, the anger in her heart gave way to a deep, painful empathy. "I loved you too," she whispered. "But now I don't know if I can trust you." Her statement hung in the air, as if time itself had paused to watch them wrestle with the collision of secrets and genuine devotion. A brittle peace followed the confrontation. Days passed with minimal conversation, tension lodged in every breath they took. Kofi respected Amara's space, sleeping on the floor while she claimed the wooden bed. She found his attempts at atonement both comforting and suffocating. Each morning, she awoke to find him mending fishing nets or patching the hut's roof, anything to avoid the elephant in the room, his undisclosed wealth and her shattered trust. Yet life had to go on. Amara still performed her daily chores, cooking, fetching water, washing clothes, her mind swirling with confusion. The villagers, ever opportunistic, sensed the strain and pounced. The rumor mill churned faster than a broken millstone. Some speculated Kofi had taken a second wife who was wealthier. Others suggested he was preparing to vanish under the cover of night. If only they knew the truth was far more startling than any of their theories. One afternoon, Amara ventured to the river, hoping the calm rush of water would soothe her turbulent thoughts. She sat on a rock, the setting sun gilding her silhouette, and remembered the few moments of happiness she'd experienced in Kofi's presence, his gentle care when she was feverish, his unwavering defense against Zara's cruelty, the quiet dinners they shared. Tears pricked her eyes. If he was truly a billionaire heir, why remain in a leaking hut, crippled by a village's scorn? She realized that perhaps they both were slaves to fear, she of never being genuinely loved, he of being judged for his disability rather than his heart. When she returned, the sight that greeted her stole the breath from her lungs. Mama Kem stood outside the hut, armed with a handful of villagers, their faces twisted with rage and envy. The tension soared as soon as Mama Kem spotted Amara. "We won't let you two hide your sins any longer," Mama Kem hissed, brandishing a makeshift club. Realizing the storm had truly arrived, Amara braced herself for the battle that would either break her entirely or set her free forever. The confrontation outside Kofi's hut was like a scene from a cursed play. Mama Kem, her face taut with malice, led the charge, while a ragtag group of neighbors, some driven by envy, others by idle curiosity, crowded behind her. Kofi stood at the threshold, arms crossed, exuding a quiet strength that made several step back involuntarily. Mama Kem wasted no time hurling accusations. "You think we don't know your secret? We've heard the rumors of hidden gold, of stolen treasure." Her voice rose in a crescendo, egged on by the murmurs of the crowd. Amara's heart hammered like it would burst from her chest. She cast a sidelong glance at Kofi, anxious about how he might respond. But Kofi remained stoic. His gaze was fixed on Mama Kem, his tone calm but commanding as he finally spoke. "Amara is my wife. Whatever riches or poverty I have her mind to disclose or keep." The hush that followed felt deafening. It was a brazen statement in a village that thrived on meddling in others' affairs. The tension ratcheted up another notch when Mama Kem advanced, her fists tightening around the club. "You tricked my daughter into a life of misery," she raged. "And now you stand here boasting you have secrets?" Amara's fury ignited. She had endured Mama Kem's scorn for years, but this was an unbearable hypocrisy. "You forced me into this marriage," she shot back, her voice trembling. "You and Zara threatened me, called me worthless, starved me. Kofi was the only one who showed me kindness." A ripple of shock passed through the onlookers. Mama Kem's face contorted, but before she could retaliate, Kofi stepped in front of Amara. "This ends now," he declared. His stare made Mama Kem's bravado falter, if only momentarily. The crowd grew uneasy, shifting from foot to foot, uncertain whether to side with the embittered mother or the enigmatic man who stood resolute. It was a standoff that felt like it could erupt into violence at any moment, and the greatest secret still lingered unspoken, waiting to change everything. When Mama Kem swung the makeshift club in a desperate lunge, it was as though the village collectively held its breath. Kofi seized her wrist mid-swing, displaying a strength that contradicted his supposed disability. Gasps rippled through the crowd and the tension shattered like glass. Mama Kem dropped the club, its clatter on the ground echoing the sudden hush that fell over the scene. "You will not harm Amara," Kofi said quietly, each syllable deliberate. His limp was still evident, but no one could deny the power behind his voice and grasp. Fear flickered in Mama Kem's eyes, followed by humiliation. Though she had come brandishing righteous indignation, she now looked cornered. One of the neighbors backed away, muttering, "He's not as weak as we thought." Another whispered, "Is it true he has more wealth than the chief?" Sensing the tide turning, Mama Kem tried to rally. "That wealth should have belonged to Zara," she shouted, though her words rang hollow. She recounted how she had raised Amara only to discover she was worthless, unworthy of a decent marriage. How she believed Kofi's rumored wealth was stolen or ill-gained. But the sincerity in her speech was overshadowed by the obvious cruelty she had shown Amara for years. Amara's chest constricted with a mixture of terror and resolve. She stepped beside Kofi, trembling but determined. She met the eyes of the assembled crowd. "I was never Mama Kem's child," she said, voice wavering yet clear. "She took me in, yes, but treated me as less than human. Kofi, on the other hand, has given me everything I never had. Respect, compassion, and safety. Whether he has 1 coin or 1,000,000, he stands for me." In that moment, something fractured in Mama Kem's gaze. Perhaps she realized her power over Amara had slipped away. The crowd, once bristling with excitement for a scandal, began to disperse, some shaking their heads, others murmuring in disbelief. As the last of them faded into the twilight, Mama Kem stood alone, her bitterness radiating like a dying ember. Amara felt an odd sense of relief. The confrontation was over, But the ramifications were only beginning. News of the standoff flashed through the village in mere hours. While some believed Kofi's display of strength was proof of a demon's trickery or an occult power, others whispered about his rumored fortune with renewed vigor. Mama Kem retreated to her home, seething in private. Zara, upon hearing the commotion, arrived the following day, her face red with indignation. She pounded on Kofi's door until Amara reluctantly let her in. Inside the humble hut, Zara's eyes flicked around in contempt. She had hoped to find gold bars stacked against the walls or chests overflowing with money, evidence she could use to claim injustice on her behalf. When she saw only the same worn stool, the same fishing net, and the same battered mat, her scowl deepened. "Where are you hiding it?" she hissed at Kofi, not bothering with niceties. "Mother says you've cheated us, taken our family's rightful claim." Amara braced herself for another confrontation, but Kofi didn't rise to Zara's provocation. "I have nothing that belongs to you," he said calmly. Zara's fury ballooned. She lunged for a small wooden chest near the bed, determined to pry it open. In a single fluid motion, Kofi stepped between her and the chest, shaking his head. "That is mine, and you will not touch it." A flicker of fear and anger contorted Zara's features. The arrogance she carried seemed to crack under the weight of Kofi's unwavering confidence. She turned to Amara, eyes brimming with resentment. "This should have been my life. You were the stray my mother picked up out of pity, and now you live here, hoarding his riches for yourself." The insult stung like salt on an open wound, but Amara held her ground. "I found a life without your cruelty. If that upsets you, that's your burden to carry." Zara let out a derisive laugh, but the bravado felt hollow. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled. Amara caught Kofi's gaze. In the quiet aftermath, they both understood Zara's departure was not an end but a warning shot. Mama Kem and Zara would not surrender easily, not while they believed a fortune was within arm's reach. The tension in the village escalated as if everyone was suspended on a tightrope between suspicion and curiosity. Some villagers openly approached Kofi, trying to glean scraps of information. Others shunned him, convinced dark sorcery was at play. In the midst of the swirling chaos, Amara felt her own emotions careen wildly. She yearned for a straightforward resolution. Either she could trust Kofi fully, or walk away for good. Late one night, Kofi found her by the flickering lantern in their hut, tears glistening on her cheeks. Gently, he sat beside her on the creaky bed. "I never wanted things to escalate like this," he murmured. The sorrow in his voice tugged at her heart. She pressed a trembling palm to her forehead. "I just want to be free from all these lies," she confessed. "I want a marriage that's real, not built on secrets." Kofi sighed, nodding. "I know, and I promise you there's no more to hide. But I can't undo the pain I caused by withholding my identity." He took her hands in his. She felt the warmth of his calloused fingers, proof of hours spent casting fishing nets. A humble act that had shaped their daily bread. "Amara, I love you. Not out of obligation, not to spite Mama Kem, but genuinely." Her heart clenched at the admission. She thought about how, even amidst all the lies, his kindness had been real. The times he stood up for her, the gentle way he tended to her when she was sick, the quiet moments they shared simple meals. Slowly, she squeezed his hands in return. "I believe you, Kofi," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm just afraid." As they embraced, the night wind rustled through the cracks, carrying the distant cries of nocturnal creatures. It was a small, fragile moment of reconciliation. Yet, beyond their walls lay a village teeming with hostility, a mother and sister bent on tearing them apart, and a hidden fortune that might shatter the very foundations of this community. Mama Kem didn't wait long to rally those who thrived on chaos. One by one, she knocked on doors under cover of darkness, feeding villagers stories of betrayal, greed, and cosmic injustice. Her venomous words slithered into impressionable ears, painting Amara as a cunning vixen who manipulated an innocent fisherman, painting Kofi as a fraud who hoarded stolen wealth. Soon, a small mob formed, men and women wielding torches, sticks, and stones. Their purpose was as twisted as Mama Kem's vendetta: storm Kofi's dwelling, unearth his secrets, and strip Amara of her ill-gotten luxuries. On the night they marched toward the hut, the moon was a pale disk veiled by clouds, and the air crackled with anticipation of violence. Shouts echoed through the narrow paths and children peered out from behind shutters in terrified curiosity. At the head of the mob, Mama Kem's eyes glowed with a mix of rage and desperation. Even Zara seemed uneasy, her bravado overshadowed by the raw fury and numbers behind them. Inside the hut, Amara and Kofi had just finished a humble meal, weary from the day's tension. The thundering footsteps and angry cries alerted them before the mob reached the door. Amara's heart pounded. She clutched Kofi's arm, recalling the earlier confrontation. This time, however, the crowd was larger and far more hostile. Without wasting a moment, Kofi pushed her behind him. The door creaked open to reveal a sea of faces, some contorted in hatred, others simply mesmerized by the spectacle. Mama Kem stepped forward, raising her torch high. "We're here for answers," she roared. "We will not be deceived anymore." The crowd howled in agreement. Amara felt a tear slip down her cheek. How could the mother who once took her in, even half-heartedly, descend to such malevolence? Kofi squared his shoulders, bracing himself. This was no time for half-truths or evasions. The final showdown had arrived, and the fate of their marriage and possibly their lives hung in the balance. Torches blazed, casting flickering shadows across the ramshackle hut. Kofi stood in the doorway, unyielding despite the jeers and raised weapons. His limp was still evident, but he radiated an air of authority that silenced the front row of onlookers. A pregnant pause stretched, thick with hostility. Then Mama Kem, eyes wild, stepped closer, thrusting a pointed finger at him. "Show us your stolen gold," she demanded. "Show us what you've robbed from rightful owners, from your so-called wealthy father." Kofi's jaw tightened. He glanced at Amara, who stood trembling behind him, then turned back to face the mob. "You want the truth?" he said, voice steady. "Fine. My wealth is no secret. My father disowned me, but his fortune is still in my name. I chose this life because I wanted honesty, not greed. But you, and here, he pinned Mama Kem with a gaze sharper than any knife, you sold your adopted daughter into a loveless marriage, then scorned her for surviving." A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd. Some lowered their torches slightly, uncertainty creeping into their eyes. Mama Kem staggered, her face twisting in fury. "Lies. If you're truly rich, why live in filth? Why let my daughter suffer like a beggar?" The question hung in the charged air, a moment of raw emotion. Kofi's voice wavered with a mixture of anger and sadness. "Because I know what it is to be cast aside, ridiculed for a weakness you can't control. I needed to live away from the vultures who only cared for my father's money. It wasn't meant to trap Amara in hardship, but when your cruelty forced her on me, I couldn't turn her away." Amara stepped forward, tears glinting in her eyes. She looked at Mama Kem, once the only maternal figure she had known, and spoke in a tone that trembled with both pain and resolve. "I forgive you," she whispered. Gasps fluttered through the crowd like startled birds. Mama Kem's jaw dropped, but no sound came out. Amara drew a shaky breath. "I forgive you because I refuse to live in hate any longer." For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of torches. Then, one by one, the villagers began to lower their weapons, unsure how to respond to such grace. The mob's momentum fractured under the weight of Amara's forgiveness. Torches dimmed as guilt and confusion rippled through the assembly. Some villagers who had joined out of boredom or fear now stood awkwardly, shifting their feet. Realizing her hold on them was slipping, Mama Kem made one last, desperate attempt to reclaim control. Her face twisted with rage. "This is not over," she screeched, hurling her torch onto the ground. Embers scattered and someone stomped them out before they could ignite the dry grasses. Zara, hesitating at her mother's side, looked torn for a fleeting second, resentment in her eyes, yet also a glimmer of doubt. But Mama Kem would not yield to introspection. With a final glare at Kofi and Amara, she turned and stalked away, her remaining supporters trailing behind like deflated shadows. A stunned silence enveloped the hut's threshold. Amara felt her knees give out and Kofi caught her before she collapsed. Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of both relief and lingering sorrow. The cluster of villagers left behind wore expressions of uneasy respect. One older woman quietly murmured, "We're sorry," before guiding the others away. The entire village had been witnesses to a truth far grander and more complicated than any rumor, that a poor fisherman was in fact a wealthy heir and that the unwanted girl had a heart strong enough to forgive even those who despised her. As the crowd dispersed into the night, Kofi gently led Amara inside. This time he guided her to the bed, insisting she rest while he fetched fresh water to wash her tear-stained face. Exhaustion weighed on her, yet a cautious sense of hope blossomed. The confrontation was over, but the aftermath would ripple for days, maybe months. Mama Kem and Zara would no doubt scheme anew. The villagers would gossip with renewed intensity. But for the first time, Amara no longer felt like prey to their judgments. She had faced the darkness and still found a way to love and forgive. Perhaps that was the greatest wealth of all. In the days that followed, an astonishing transformation unfolded. Word traveled fast that Kofi's father, the powerful patriarch who had once abandoned him, had passed away, leaving behind businesses, lands, and vast sums of money. Officials arrived at the village with documents for Kofi to sign, transferring the inheritance fully into his name. The jaws of the villagers practically hit the ground. Overnight, the useless cripple they had mocked became the region's wealthiest man. And yet Kofi remained true to the humility that had guided him. He arranged for the renovation of the decrepit huts in the village, ensuring families had secure roofs over their heads. He invested in better fishing equipment and small enterprises, offering loans to those in desperate need. The same people who once scorned him now approached with reverence, calling him Master Kofi or Lord Kofi. Amara looked on with quiet pride, her own spirit renewed. Though Mama Kim and Zara lurked on the periphery, their schemes silenced by the public goodwill Kofi had garnered, they occasionally cast bitter looks. But there was little they could do. Amara was untouchable under Kofi's protection. One balmy evening, as the village children played on the freshly lit streets, Kofi knelt before Amara in front of a gathering of curious onlookers. He produced a ring more radiant than any star in the sky. "Our marriage was forced," he said, voice resonating with sincerity. "But now I ask you of your own free will, Amara, will you be my wife in every sense, for love, not obligation?" Overcome with emotion, Amara's eyes brimmed with tears as she whispered a resounding yes. The villagers erupted in applause and cheers, celebrating a union forged through hardship, compassion, and undeniable affection. That night, as Kofi and Amara walked hand in hand through the transformed village, the wind carried not the chill of old resentments, but the promise of a bright future. Despite all the secrets, betrayals, and heartbreak, love and forgiveness had triumphed. And in that triumph, they found a home neither had ever truly known. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the story with your friends, and comment below on the lessons you've learned.